We went in and we started to interview him and advise him of what had happened, and what Mr. O'Bryan had said, and we advised him of his rights. We kept on going past his house.
Hey, happy Halloween. I hope you guys are doing well, and welcome to episode 2 of Evil Strikes. I am your host, Boujee Hustla, and this is a Boujee Hustla production. Evil Strikes is a new series that I've started on my channel where I do my makeup on camera with you guys while sharing a true crime case. And since today is Halloween, both the makeup look and today's true crime case will be heavily inspired by the holiday. All the products used will be listed below, and anything with a link will be a part of my Amazon storefront. So, if you're a true crime fan like I am, then you're going to fit right on in with the rest of us here. So go ahead and subscribe and get cozy because there's plenty more on the way. Small disclaimer, very small. The very first portion of the story got deleted or corrupted. I don't know how, but it's missing, non-existent. So I will be doing that portion via audio, and then it will just segue right into the makeup tutorial. Because what's a Boujee Hustle production without a little technical difficulty, right? But don't worry, you haven't missed anything. All I did was one eyebrow off camera, and I primed my eyes with a concealer. That's it. So anyway, I just want to thank you again for supporting the channel and the new series. Also, if you do have a case request that you'd like to submit, just shoot me a DM on Instagram and I will eventually get to it. All right, let's start today's case. So I have a question for everyone watching this video. Have you ever been taught or taught your children to never take candy from strangers? I think it's safe to say the answer is yes, right? But what happens if we replace that stranger with someone that you trust? Let's say a pastor, your friend's parents, or even your own parent. Would you still take the candy then? I'm going to assume your answer was yes, as it should be. And in today's true crime case, Halloween edition, I'm going to be covering the story of Ronald Clark O'Bryan, a man who manipulated someone who wholeheartedly trusted him for personal gain. Ronald Clark O'Bryan was born on October 19, 1944. He worked as an optician and served as a deacon at a Baptist church, where he sang in the choir and oversaw the parochial bus program. He lived with his wife, Daneen, and 2 children, Timothy and Elizabeth, in Deer Park, Texas, a middle-class suburb of Houston. Those who knew O'Bryan considered him a model citizen. A pastor described O'Bryan as a good Christian man and an above-average father. In reality, O'Bryan could not keep a job. Like, this guy, I don't know what his problem was. I don't know if he was lying on the application or he wasn't making it through training, but he had 21 jobs over the time span of 10 years. And each job he got fired. So after I did a little bit more digging, I realized that he got fired because he was committing fraudulent activity or he was just extremely negligent on the job. In the fall of 1974, O'Bryan yet again was on his way to being fired from Texas State Optical because he was suspected of stealing money. I'm telling you, I had said something about this in my previous case that I covered. You just never know who you're dealing with. This man is supposedly in the church. He's a good Christian man, and this man is out here thieving and can't hold a job. Oh my gosh. Now, O'Bryan's take-home salary for a week was $150, which barely covered rent and food. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but $150 barely covers dinner for one night, let alone a week. So I don't know. But then again, this was back in the day where a dollar went way further than it does now. Then it was later discovered that O'Bryan was in debt over $100 $100,000. O'Bryan is really just out here being a whole model citizen. So after struggling literally all of his life, O'Bryan decided that it was time to make a change and that he was going to devise a plan that was going to set him up financially for the rest of his life, in his opinion. But in order to do that, he needed one other person to act out his plan, and that was Timothy O'Bryan. October 31st, 1974 would be just like any other day for the O'Bryan family. He'd wake up and get started with his routine, but this particular time, he would be super excited because he would get a chance to act out on the plan that he devised to become rich. Now, normally, Ronald would not be excited about Halloween because he never expressed any real interest in it. But because of this plan that he devised, he was so eager to get things going on Halloween. So fast forward to the end of the day. The kids are super pumped. They're excited. They're getting ready to go trick-or-treating. And they made plans with a fellow family friend by the name of Jim Bates to go trick-or-treating together in the neighborhood. So Ronald was taking his two kids, Timothy and Elizabeth, and then Jim Bates was going to bring along his two children who were also friends with the O'Bryans. So Jim, Ronald, and the four kids start trick-or-treating, and they approach their first house, which unfortunately they didn't get a response to. So naturally, they decided to move along after waiting a little while and realizing that no one was going to come to the door. So as they're heading over to the next house to make an attempt at getting some candy, Ronald kind of lags behind and tells them that he's going to catch up with them. So after about a minute or two, Ronald ends up catching up with Jim and the children, and he's holding 5 huge pixie sticks. Now, for my Gen Zs, you probably do not know what pixie sticks are, so let me enlighten you. So pixie sticks are sweet and sour powdered sugary candies that come in a straw-like tube. So you would just rip the top off and literally pour it in your mouth, and they were really, really good, to be honest. Really addicting as well. And they came in a variety of flavors. Ronald ends up telling the group that someone actually was at home and that he received the pixie sticks from the homeowner. So he goes ahead and distributes the candy to all of the children. So Ronald O'Bryan had a total of 5 pixie sticks, in which he handed 1 pixie stick to each of the children of Jim Bates, and then he handed 1 pixie stick to Timothy and 1 pixie stick to Elizabeth, his kids. So of course, because there were 4 kids and 5 pixie sticks, he had 1 pixie stick left over, which he reserved until he came across a child that he recognized from the church and gave him the last pixie stick. Now, what they all didn't know was that there was a special surprise in these pixie sticks, which would change the course of how the rest of this story plays out. So before bed, Ronald explained to the children that they could all have 1 piece of candy. And so they went through the candy, and Timothy decided he was going to try the pixie stick. So he let Timothy try the candy, and after he ate the candy, Ronald went ahead and exited out of the room. Within less than a minute, he could hear his son Timothy crying that his stomach hurt really bad. So once Ronald hears him crying, he meets him in the bathroom where Timothy is convulsing, vomiting, and gasping for air. And within minutes, Timothy's body goes limp. So clearly we have an emergency on our hands. So they go ahead and contact 911, and unfortunately Timothy would end up passing away en route to the hospital. When Timothy's body was brought to the morgue, the medical examiner recalled the scent of almonds coming from Timothy's breath, which is an indicator of cyanide poisoning. An autopsy later confirmed that Timothy ingested enough cyanide poisoning to kill 2 to 3 full-grown adults. You guys are probably wondering, how does a 9-year-old boy accidentally come across cyanide poisoning? So police opened an investigation and started off with examining the Halloween candy, because since this had to be something that Timothy ingested, they needed to find out what were the last contents that he consumed. And it was reported that he ingested the pixie sticks. So police were able to retrieve the other 4 pixie sticks, in which all of them were uneaten, thank God. And they were able to determine that someone had taken 2 inches of candy out of the pixie sticks and replaced it with the cyanide poisoning. Now, if you guys are paying attention to the details of the story, I just mentioned that they retrieved 4 pixie sticks. There was still a 5th one floating around. So as the information about Timothy's death being poisoned from Halloween candy raised fear in the community, numerous parents in Deer Park and the surrounding area turned in all of their candy to the authorities because they were afraid that their candy may have been laced as well.
Astonishment. I can't comprehend.
When the case first came to light, the community was horrified by the thought that someone had randomly poisoned a child.
Initially did not suspect O'Bryan to have anything to do with his son's murder, but once the autopsy came back, the wheels started turning. So as the wheels are spinning, the police are now starting to wonder, things just aren't adding up. 2 plus 2 is not equaling 4, okay? E does not equal MC squared. What is going on? And police, they're starting to realize that something's fishy here, bro. Something is really fishy. But before they could even further investigate how Timothy could have possibly been poisoned, they really needed to find out where that 5th pixie stick was. Because once that autopsy report came back, they had to ask Ronald, how did he get the pixie stick? And of course, Ronald would tell police that it was given to him by a homeowner. And that's it. End of story. So he gave each child a pixie stick, and then he ended up giving another kid, a 10-year-old boy that he knew from church, the last one. So at this point, they are really in a haste to try and get to that boy and praying that he hasn't consumed that pixie stick yet. So either they're going to find a boy alive and well, or he's also going to be suffering the same fate as Timothy. So authorities were desperate to find the parents of that 5th child. And once they do, they immediately notify them to apprehend the candy from their son, and in the hopes that he hadn't eaten it already. So once the parents had received the news, they were hysterical because they were not sure if their son had already consumed the candy or not. So they rush upstairs to his room and they find him not moving. He's just laying on the bed. Once they get closer, they realize he's actually fallen asleep with the pixie stick in his hand. So later on, they would confirm that the reason why his pixie stick was not consumed was because he couldn't get it open. It was actually stapled shut and he was having a tough time. And I guess between him being so tired and struggling to open the candy, he ended up falling asleep. So that staple actually saved his life. So after testing all 5 pixie sticks, it was determined that the stick that Timothy consumed contained enough cyanide to kill 2 adults, while the other sticks had enough to kill 4 adults. Somebody was out to get them kids. Somebody was out for blood, honey. They were out for blood. So O'Bryan initially told police that he could not remember which house he got the pixie sticks from. And at that point, the police became super suspicious of O'Bryan. And his neighbor had only taken their children to 2 streets because it was raining that day. So there weren't that many homes to have visited. And out of all of the houses that they checked on those 2 streets, all of them confirmed that none of them handed out pixie sticks. O'Bryan initially told police that he could not remember which house he got the pixie sticks from. And the police kind of started raising eyebrows like, how do you not remember which home you got the pixie sticks from? And Jim would even confirm that they only visited 2 streets because it was raining. So they went around to all 2 streets and every homeowner would confirm that they did not hand out any pixie sticks whatsoever. The pressure is getting worse. So now at this point, their suspicions are growing even farther because they walked that whole round 3 times to make sure that everyone's story corroborated, and it did. But whose story wasn't corroborating? Old boy Ronald O'Bryan. So O'Bryan took them back to the only home that didn't respond to them because there was no witness who could testify on whether there was candy actually received from that homeowner or not. But O'Bryan said he did receive candy from them. And the story that O'Bryan told was that the homeowner didn't turn on the lights. He just cracked the door open and handed him the pixie sticks, and he remembered that the homeowner's arm was super hairy. Now, Courtney Melvin is the homeowner of the said house that O'Bryan claimed to have received the pixie sticks from. Now, Melvin, he was an air traffic controller at the William P. Hobby Airport, and he actually didn't get home on Halloween night until 11 p.m., which was well after they had stopped trick-or-treating. And to further corroborate the story, police had spoken to over 200 people who confirmed that our guy Melvin was at work, not at home handing out candy. Try again, O'Bryan. Try again. So now there is an open investigation on O'Bryan because every time he reports something to police, it doesn't add up. The math ain't mathin'. So police later figured out that he was in debt $100,000, like I mentioned earlier, and that he couldn't hold a job for the 10 years, like we also knew already. The police were just getting caught up to speed. So while Ronald is out here lying to police, he's also keeping secrets. And he would keep a very big secret from his wife that the police would later uncover. Our boy O'Bryan, remember that plan I told you guys about earlier? What that was going to lead him to financial freedom? Here's the plan. So a few months before the death of Timothy, he had taken out an insurance policy on his children for $10,000 each. Then, about a month before he was going to act out this plan, he took out 2 additional life insurance policies at $20,000 apiece. And then he did it again at $10,000 each for a total of $60,000 approximately in insurance policies on his kids. He was going to kill his kids in order to gain the financial freedom he always wished he had. What kind of sick monster is that? These are people you brought into the world, innocent people who trust you with their life. They can't make it in the world without you. And so instead of giving them up for adoption or getting a second job or coming up with a strategy between you and your wife on how to generate more money in the household, you take it upon yourself to come up with this heinous crime to kill them off so that you can be financially free? Wow. Father of the Year. And that, my friends, was the plan that was going to lead him to financial freedom. Police get wind of these insurance policies. They have to make sure that his wife was not corroborating this big plan together with him. And of course, she would reiterate that she had nothing to do with the plan. She didn't even know the policies existed. And then they did a further investigation and found out that he had contacted the insurance policies on the day of the murder, before he was getting ready to kill his son. So that he could understand how he would be able to collect that money should something happen. I just think that's crazy that he would... My brain cannot even process doing something like that to anyone, let alone a child. So once the police had learned about the inquiry to the insurance company by O'Bryan, they pieced together a timeline of events, and this is how it went. So it started with O'Bryan calling the insurance company to inquire about how to collect on the insurance policies that he had just taken out on his children in the recent months. Once the insurance company told him what he wanted to hear, he then went over to a chemical supply store and inquired about the purchase of cyanide poisoning. He ended up leaving empty-handed because they told him the minimum requirement to purchase was 5 pounds. So I'm assuming wherever he went was probably like a wholesale supplier type of place. So then O'Bryan ends up getting his hands on some cyanide, and then he moves forward with the October 31st murders and attempted murders. So police started piecing things together and came to the conclusion that the reason he shared the pixie sticks with the other children was to cover up the crime that he was committing against his own. And he didn't want to appear to be the suspect, so instead, in his mind, he thought that creating a new suspect by poisoning other children's candy would cover up his insurance fraud and murder charge that he was soon to get. So once they figured out O'Bryan's financial freedom plan, they decided to take it a step further and dig a little deeper to get solid proof. So they later discovered that O'Bryan had inquired with several chemical companies inquiring about how to acquire cyanide poisoning, and even jokingly asked how much it would take to kill a person. Then, to add insult to injury, the police ended up finding a pocket knife in O'Bryan's home that had powder residue, which matched to the pixie stick candies that he had handed out to the kids. But O'Bryan, he was willing to go to his grave before he admitted that he had anything to do with this crime, even with all of the chips stacked up against him. So he would sit there and keep on claiming that he was innocent. So after failing a polygraph test, O'Bryan was arrested on November 5th, 1974. So within a week, yoked him right on up. And he was charged with capital murder for the death of Timothy O'Bryan, and 4 counts of attempted murder for each child that he had given a pixie stick to. So O'Bryan entered a plea of not guilty on all 5 counts, and on May 5th of 1975, his trial would begin in Houston. So during the trial, there was a chemist who was acquainted with O'Bryan who would testify, stating that back in 1973, O'Bryan reached out to him to inquire about how cyanide poisoned people and how much it would take to actually kill someone. Wow. He'd been thinking about this for over a year. Then a chemical supply salesman will also testify that O'Bryan had reached out to him inquiring about how to purchase the cyanide poisoning. So he used one to ask about how much was fatal, and then the other to find out about how to acquire the poison. I guess because he felt like if he asked too many questions to one person, they would get suspicious. But if he separated the questions amongst the parties, it wouldn't raise any eyebrows. Like, this guy O'Bryan is a real piece of work. He had been planning the demise of his son for at least a year. I know it was definitely longer because that was only when he decided to act on asking the questions, which means he probably tried to do research on his own and wasn't getting anywhere. So then he decided it was time for him to just reach out to a chemist instead, who would definitely know. Sick individual, bro. Sick. I'm telling you, these people that do these things to innocent children, oh my gosh, I have no sympathy. No sympathy for them. I don't care what they went through as children. It doesn't give you the right to continue. So in addition to the 2 that testified against O'Bryan, close friends and family members also noticed that he had a significant interest all of a sudden in cyanide poisoning, and he would talk about it all the time. His sister-in-law and brother-in-law also testified that on the day of Timothy's funeral, he was already making plans with his insurance policy money, talking about he needed to go on vacation and he couldn't wait to take a long vacation once that money hit. Your son is not even in the ground, sir. Could you at least give him the respect? Although you're the one who did it, could you at least, can he get a piece of the earth first before you out here spending his Oh, Lord. And then there was also more evidence that Ronald was guilty because his wife recalled that Timothy did not choose the pixie sticks, but rather Ronald chose the pixie sticks for him. And Timothy actually made a comment stating that he didn't want the pixie sticks. He wanted to eat something else. But Ronald was very insistent that he eat the pixie sticks. O'Brien's legal team basically came up with the story that this whole death was related to the urban legend of some mad poisoner who handed out laced Halloween candy or needles or even candy apples with razors in them. And although these rumors would circulate, there was never any proof of anyone who actually fell victim to this so-called urban legend. Now, because of how heinous and horrific this crime was and who he did the crime to, it garnered national attention, and he was deemed the Candyman, aka the man who killed Halloween. So on June 3rd, 1975, approximately 8 months after the horrific case of Timothy O'Bryan, Ronald O'Bryan would be found guilty by a jury, and it only took them 46 minutes to come back with their verdict. And they found him guilty on all charges. Capital murder plus the 4 counts of attempted murder. And then it only took the jury 71 minutes to sentence him to death. And shortly after that, his wife would leave him and get a divorce. And then she would get remarried, and her new husband adopted her daughter Elizabeth as his own. So at the time, men who were sentenced to death under Texas law were confined to the LSI unit near Huntsville, Texas. And according to a reverend, he had no friends while he was imprisoned. And for good reasoning. Prisoners do not take lightly to crimes that are committed to women, but children take priority. If you commit any type of crime on a child and they get wind of it, your days are numbered. And they hated him so much to the point that they had petitioned to hold an organized demonstration on O'Brien's execution day to express how much they truly despised him. So O'Brien's first execution date was set for August 8th, 1980, and his attorney has successfully petitioned for a stay of execution. And then a second date was scheduled for May 25th, 1982. And that date was also postponed. So a judge by the name of Michael McSpadden scheduled a third execution date for October 31st, 1982, which would have been the 18th anniversary of the crime that he committed against his son Timothy. And he offered to personally drive O'Brien to the death chamber. So this would have been the first time in the history of Texas execution that someone was going to be killed via lethal injection. So after this scheduled death sentence, the Supreme Court would intervene and delay the date yet again to give O'Brien a chance to pursue an appeal to seek a new trial. So a fourth date was rescheduled for March 34th, 1984. And O'Brien's lawyers saw another petition stating that the lethal injection was too cruel and unusual punishment. On March 31st, 1984, a little after midnight, O'Brien would be executed via lethal injection. His last meal included a T-bone steak medium to well done, French fries with ketchup, whole kernel corn, sweet peas, Boston cream pies, a salad which consisted of lettuce, tomato, and eggs with French dressing, iced tea and sweetener, sweet peas if I didn't say that already, and rolls. I am so greedy. Why did I remember all of that? Ronald O'Brien was buried at the Forest Park East Cemetery in Webster, Texas. And Timothy was buried in the Forest Park Lawndale Cemetery in Houston. And if you care to know what Ronald O'Brien's last words were, here they go. What is about to transpire in a few moments is wrong. However, we as human beings do mistakes and errors. This execution is one of those wrongs, yet doesn't mean our whole system of justice is wrong. Therefore, I would forgive all who have taken part in any way in my death. Also, To anyone I have offended in any way during my 39 years, I pray and ask for your forgiveness, just as I forgive anyone who offended me in any way. And I pray and ask God's forgiveness for all of us, respectively, as human beings. To my loved ones, I extend my undying love. To those close to me, know in your hearts I love you one and all. God bless you all, and may God's best blessings be always yours. Ronald C. O'Bryan. P.S. During my time here, I have been treated well by all TDC personnel. So there you have it, Ronald Clark O'Bryan's last words before he was put to death. Now, I'm no psychiatrist or psychologist, but how can you say all of that but not mention your own son by name? And I feel because he didn't do that, he must have been having an extreme case of guilt for what he did to that poor child. And I sincerely hope that he felt that guilt all the way to his first-class trip to hell. And circling back to his trial, where his lawyers tried to blame his crime on an urban legend regarding a man who secretly poisons candy and does all of these horrific things to kids, it's ironic that he actually became the urban legend myth and brought it to life. There's your, I guess, fun fact or observation. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. I hope you liked today's content, the makeup look that I did. And if you recreate it, even though this video will probably be uploaded so late, tag me on Instagram anyway. And I hope you take something from the case as well. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like, and stay tuned for the next episode of Evil Strikes.